The EU's response to the coronavirus has received sharp criticism for being slow and uncoordinated. But now Brussels is hoping to recover with an ambitious long-term recovery plan. Dubbed Next Generation EU, the aid package comes with a price tag of €750 billion. Two-thirds of the money will be handed to the hardest hit countries in Europe. But the proposal still needs the support of all 27 member states before it can go ahead. And that means convincing the so-called Frugal Four. Jack Parrock reports.
Brussels says the way through the economic crisis from the coronavirus pandemic is a €750 billion fund they're calling Next Generation EU.
Of that total, 500 billion will be distributed in grants and 250 billion in loans passed on to member states.
It's a massive shift for the EU. The suggestion is the EU Commission will raise money on international markets with its AAA rating and give it out to member states hardest hit. Countries in the bloc have never pooled their debt together in this way before. The plans are now being trawled over by Europe's political factions.
We welcome the focus that you've put on grants to make sure that no member state is left behind in this crisis. The overall volume might not prove sufficient in time, but in any case, what we need to make sure is that we don't lessen the ambitions.
The European Commission says the fund, along with the budget it's proposing simultaneously, will total €1.85 trillion.
It's not only a matter of solidarity. It is also a question of how we will be able to survive, how we'll have an interior market, and to preserve the existence of the euro.
French President Emmanuel Macron and the Spanish, Greek and Italian Prime Ministers all took to Twitter to welcome the proposal. But they'll now enter into battle with the so-called Frugal Four countries, Austria, the Netherlands, Sweden and Denmark, who are staunchly against shouldering debt with already heavily indebted southern neighbours. Economists back this proposal to work if leaders can agree.
It will do wonders. It will allow businesses to keep people on their payrolls that they would otherwise have to lay off. It will allow municipal districts to go ahead with replacing bridges and digging holes for things, even when their tax revenues were down. It will just keep Europe going. It'll be great. If, on the other hand, people get really worried about how it looks and what are they paying for in this abstract way, but if that's the case, we could be stuck for a much harder ride.
Europe's businesses are reopening and the fund is placed into the EU's 7-year budget, which runs out at the end of 2020. The pressure's on for EU countries to work this out. Jack Parrock, Euronews, Brussels.
Well, for more on this story, let's cross to our EU correspondent, Shona Murray, who's in Dublin. Shona, as Jack was saying there, much focus on the potential difficulty of winning over the so-called Frugal Four here before this package gets the green light. Are there any signs the Commission may win over their support?
Well, I'd say at this point there aren't any signs that the Frugal Four are objecting to the plan per se. I think that when you look at it, €750 billion of grants and loans, €250 billion of loans, which means that the Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and her team took into account some of the proposals from the Frugal Four, that the whole of the fund wouldn't just be 100% of grants. And I think there's something of a fusion there. Now, we heard yesterday from Sebastian Kurz, the Chancellor of Austria, who's the sort of unofficial spokesperson for the Frugal Four. He gave an interview with Politico, and first of all he welcomed the fact that the fund itself was going to be temporary, that it wouldn't be the first step to a transfer union, which is something that the Frugal Four have very much resisted as well, so that it would last up to 2 to 3 years only. Now, what he did mention, and this is widely to be expected from him, was that he wanted further negotiations on the ratio of grants to loans. They would obviously prefer much more of the proportion to be loans, and that really is up for negotiation. Ursula von der Leyen herself said this yesterday, said the amount was up for negotiation and the ratios up for negotiation. But our colleague Stefan Grobe spoke to Ursula von der Leyen yesterday, and he asked her whether she was confident she'd have their support.
Crisis affects all member states. All of them see the economic damage in the single market, but also in their national economies. And therefore, this is Europe's moment. We have to overcome this crisis together. the proposal I put forward is in a frame that is trusted, known by every member state, quality proven. The European budget and Next Generation EU, the recovery package, will enable us to come out stronger from the crisis than before.
More generally, Shona, we've seen a lot of rifts, of course, within the European Union in recent months. How far can this package go towards healing those divisions, would you say?
Well, I suppose from a size point of view, when you look at the countries most hit, Italy and Spain, both their prime ministers were out yesterday saying this is an excellent start for the EU. So I think on that part there is really that it's quite widely welcomed. At the same time, Alistair, we know that traditionally any negotiation when it comes to the EU 7-year budget is a typically acrimonious affair. Add to that this colossal amount of money and the risk attached, it could get very difficult, particularly also the negotiations that are going to have to take place about the own resources, how the EU is going to pay this back. But at the moment there is quite a level of support and I suppose political euphoria that they've at least come to this deal at this point. Alistair.
Shona Murray, EU correspondent in Dublin. Thanks.